Tara Robinson, who was clinically dead in 2014, is here, miraculously here today, to answer my questions.
I went into sudden cardiac arrest on the operating table and died and went to heaven. Came back here, luckily, thank God. So although I love my family very much, I experienced something so beautiful in heaven that I did not want to come back here. And the change I wanted to see was screen people and then educate. There's been enough talk. Time for some action. We screened a bunch of people and we've educated, but most importantly, we saved lives, and that's the impact that we're having. And so for you to send me home time after time, that's murder.
So we were both blessed. She say I saved her life, but she saved mine.
Welcome to the Pioneering Patient Podcast. I'm Michael George of Sages Healthcare Consulting. This edition is brought to you in collaboration with the Global Heart Hub, the international alliance providing a voice for people living with and affected by cardiovascular disease. On the 12th of April 2014, school counsellor, wife and mother of two, Tara Robinson, passed away with a fatal heart attack. It was the third heart attack she'd suffered in as many days. The mystery at the time was, why could an active gym-going 40-year-old with none of the normal cardiovascular risk factors suffer such a fatal heart attack? Well, to help me answer that today is the CEO of Black Heart Association from the US, Tara Robinson. Yes, you heard that right. Tara Robinson, who was clinically dead in 2014, is here, miraculously here today, to answer my questions. So Tara, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so the first question is, you were clinically dead in 2014. How are you here today with us? Because you're very much alive.
I'm very much alive, thank God, right? 2014, when I had my heart attack, I went into sudden cardiac arrest on the operating table and died and went to heaven. Came back here, luckily, thank God, and I'm here to share my story with the world.
That's amazing. And so let's look a week beforehand. So let's say April the 5th.
Okay.
You're Fredrick, your husband, you're having a great time. You've got two lovely children, 6 together. Got a job you love. Did you have any idea of what was to come in the next week?
No, I think we had just got back from New Orleans, like a couple of days before. We had a good time in New Orleans, hanging out. I think it might have been close to his birthday. And so felt fine. I mean, other than my symptoms coming and going, my left arm going numb and my neck bothering me. But other than that, we just came back from New Orleans. I'm in my classroom, just doing life like everybody else.
Yeah. And so things started getting a bit more tricky on April the 10th. So what happened that day?
Actually, everything was fine. I went to bed. We were okay, had dinner, all the things. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up. My left arm was numb. My neck felt like a crook. My upper chest had pressure. My jaw was numb. I was hot flashing, clammy, sweating, felt sick to my stomach. And I just told him, woke him up and said, something's wrong. And he was like, well, do you want to go to the hospital? And I was like, yes, because it was different from my body. Yeah. Totally different. It felt like something was misfiring. And so we got dressed and we headed to the ER.
And so the ER, what were they saying? What were they telling you?
So we arrived to the nearest ER that was closest to our house, and they do an EKG. Well, I'm telling them the story, like I'm telling you, because I feel much better at this point. So I'm telling them all the signs and the symptoms that I had, and they do the EKG. It was normal. They do the rest of the blood work. It was normal. And the doctor comes out and he says, well, you're too young to be having a heart attack. And I was like, I agree with you. I am too young to be, and what are you talking about? So that was my take. Like, what are you talking about? I am too young and I am too thin. So I was agreeing with all that he was saying. And so he was like, well, just follow up with your primary care doctor. And I was like, okay, because I'm not thinking it's my heart either. And so we leave there and I get home, get dressed, and get to work like everybody else does, put our capes back on and kind of dismiss what just happened and get to my job, and I'm back at it.
And so you've already suffered one heart attack, not realizing it.
Yes.
So it's 9 o'clock that day, you're about to start work.
Mm-hmm.
what happens now?
And bam, it happens again. That's my favorite word through this whole thing, bam. Because I felt like it just comes out of the blue. And so I told my assistant that was in the classroom, I said, hey, this is happening again. And she was like, what happened? What has happened? I hadn't even had time to tell her that I'd been to the ER and, all these things. And so I'm trying to explain to her what happened at the ER and what's happening with me now. And so I'm going through all the same symptoms, but this time I do feel a little weaker, so I am on my knees. I did have a student that was cutting up that morning. So I think the stress of him cutting up, kind of triggered that second one. And so I was calling it an episode.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm having another episode. And so she goes out and get the nurse and calls 911, and the fire department arrives and they do an EKG in my classroom and still nothing. Yeah. And so I'm telling her I'm okay, because I do feel okay. By the time the fire department, I'm sitting in my chair at work. And so she decides to call Fredrick. Nobody asked her to do that. I did not. Yeah. So she calls Fredrick and she says, this happened, this just happened. And he said, get back to the hospital, because the fire department was like, it's up to you if you want to go back or not. And of course, who wants to be at the hospital? So I was like, that's okay. Whatever this is kind of comes and goes. So he made me go back to the hospital. So I get to the hospital and I'm feeling fine. Yeah. And I'm telling them all the story. They kind of know because, I guess the ambulance called ahead. And I run into another doctor, cardiovascular doctor. Yeah. And she's saying, well, we don't have any reason to keep you. It's like you described, like you've had something's going on with your heart. And I'm like, nothing's going on with my heart. I don't know why y'all keep saying that. And so she was like, well, we have no reason to keep you. And I said, well, please keep me overnight because this keeps happening. And I don't want anybody to think I'm making these up, of course. So I need it to happen here. And so she was adamant that they had no reason to keep me overnight. And then she said, well, let me do a heart enzyme test. Yeah. And she's explaining that if it's elevated, then this is going on with your heart. Something's going on with your heart. So they do that test and it's slightly elevated. Yeah. And so she was like, well, we still have no reason to keep you because insurance won't cover it. I said, but you said if it's off, then something could be going on. So please. So they kept me overnight and...
Yeah. So then they kept you overnight. You'd had your second heart attack without knowing it, despite being in the hospital and looked at by a cardiovascular doctor. So you go home again. You have visitors. You feel up to cleaning the shower, and then...
Yes, all of that. I'm cleaning my shower because I'm released and I go home, and I'm released at 11. I don't know why that time sticks with me. And then at 4 o'clock, I'm crawling back in the bedroom telling my husband that something's wrong. And I said, it's happening again. And he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I just want to take a nap because it just comes and goes and they don't know any more than we do at this point. And so I don't know what prompted him to say, you don't get to die on me today. I'm going to get you back to the hospital. So he got me back. We had to stop and get gas. There's a bunch of things going on at this point. And so, but this time was different. I still had all the symptoms when I arrived at the hospital.
And so you arrived at the hospital. What happened? It was an emergency by this time, was it? And
I just walked and got in the bed and told, they just said, just go back because I just left. So I walked and put myself in the bed, and then they hooked up the EKG, and then the cold blue thing went off. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not dead. Yeah. But all these people came out of everywhere, and that's when they kind of told me that I was having a massive heart attack.
So what's your memory? Because you won't know all of this because you were dead for a period. So what is your memory of what was being said, and when do you remember things again?
I remember everything up until when I die, and then I remember some things afterwards. Yeah. So all this time when they're telling me about my heart, me and him are sitting, me and my husband are sitting there like in shock, like deers and headlights, because we were like, what? Because mind you, I have no markers, have no history of my own, and so this was very alarming, to say the least.
Yeah. And so, what did they say was the reason? Were you given any reason? Because I think you were a medical mystery to them, weren't you?
Yes, I think think I'm still a medical mystery. That's the thing. They don't know. He took it to 25 cardiovascular doctors in that area, and they couldn't believe I was still alive based on, how many heart attacks I done had up until this point and the damage that was done. I had 99% blockage. We know that to be the widowmaker. And so I don't know how it went undetected.
Yeah. And so you've had 3 heart attacks in 3 days. You've been clinically dead. You don't recover from that. You don't leave hospital and just recover. That must have been hard physically, hard mentally. How did you get through that period?
As women, we're so strong. Yeah. And so I had to peel off those layers of being strong and and be okay with being weak for a moment. And that was hard. So mentally, I dealt with the fact that, first of all, they gave me like 20 different medications to take. And I'm like, what is this? So that was panic. And then all the changes I had to make that I thought we were doing good on and still tighten up even more on eating and salt and all these things they throw at you when you leave the hospital, then to deal with the fact that I died or that I'm even having a heart attack. So I'm dealing with all these little nuances and still not wanting my husband to see me as weak or see my kids to see me down or sick or worry them. And so you're dealing with all of these things in your mind. My job, can I be off? I had, as a school, you only get 10 days in the U.S. being off. So I had to put in for, all the leave and all of those things that impact us that we don't talk about after having, heart attacks or dealing with chronic disease that worry us. So mentally and physically, I'm fighting on both ends.
So you have been therapy. So in terms of your job, you're worried about income, you're worried about keeping your job. It's a real mental strain. Yeah. I think you talked about survivor's guilt. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, I'm worried about my job. I'm worried about my family as a whole, worried about myself, and then you deal with survivor's guilt. I love my family, I love my children, but I didn't want to come back to the good old, US of A. Yeah. I didn't want to come back because when you go to heaven, I experienced peace. Yeah. And so it wiped my mind just really clear of worry. And so who wants to come back and have to deal with all of that again? So although I love my family very much, I experienced something so beautiful in heaven that I did not want to come back here. Wow. So dealing with all of that, I needed therapy.
Because your faith is very important to you.
Oh, yes. I wouldn't be here without God. I think the first doctor, the second doctor just would have not been able to save my life. It took that third doctor being there that day on call to save me. And he talks about his faith during that whole incident when I died and came back. He came in the ICU and told me God had me in the palm of his hands. So it had to be the right doctor.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So cardiac rehabilitation, you had that. How important, how difficult was it for you at times? Because I think you also talk about searching on Google and how that tells you things perhaps you don't want to know.
Listen, Google had me, allegedly dead in a couple of days or months after you have a heart attack. You're trying to fill in the parts that they might have told you at the hospital, but you don't remember everything. So you're trying to educate yourself on, will this happen again? What will it be like if it happened again? So you're worried that it's going to happen again. And where will you be? What will you be doing? Will the help be there that you need? But cardiac rehab was given to me by my doctor, and I accepted it because you do have to make the choice to go. It is 6 weeks, and all that time you have to go during the day. So we're talking about work hours again. And so, but thank God I worked for a principal that understood and allowed me to go without stressing me out. But had it not been for cardiac rehab and I had doctors and nurses that were wonderful that just kind of helped me, get back on my feet and kind of help me realize I wouldn't break so easily again. And so, yeah.
So you go through this and you decide you're now motivated. You're going to do some volunteering. You're going to volunteer for the American Heart Association, AHA. So tell me why you did that and what sort of things you did with them.
Because like everybody else, everybody knows AHA, right? It's a household brand. And so I called them from my ICU bed and I wanted to know, how do I get involved? How do I learn everything I need to learn about heart disease? Because what I've seen all my life did not represent me. It did not look like me. I wasn't an older white gentleman clutching, my stomach or my chest. I wasn't turning red, and I wasn't overweight. So how does this, happen. And so that's kind of how I got involved. And I just showed up one night and stuffed bags for one of their events.
Yeah. And you kept going. What other things did you do with the AHA?
I kept going. Actually became a national spokesperson for the AHA. I do some behind the scenes consulting. I haven't done it in a while, but I've done a lot with AHA. They were gave me the first opportunity to tell my story at this big fundraiser they had. And so, doing that work made me also realize that more work needed to be done.
Yeah. Because you say you saw a gap there that needed to be filled. So you set up the organization, which now is known as the Black Heart Association. Yes. So what was that gap that you saw that needed to be filled?
The gap was heart disease is personal. It needs to be a face-to-face conversation with community members. And how do we do it differently? Because obviously it's not working. It didn't reach me, you know. So how do we do it differently? And with 59% of Black women in the U.S. having some form of cardiovascular disease, and then 58% of our men, okay, I need to be the change I want to see. And the change I wanted to see was screen people and then educate from their numbers. And so that's what we did. And first we just was talking about it. Yeah. Going to churches and talking, that wasn't enough. Yeah. There's been enough talk. Yeah. Time for some action.
Time for some action.
Yeah.
And that action became even more important when you had your own personal reason for doing this, but you suffered another personal loss with your brother-in-law, Stephen.
Yes, we were rocky heart when we first started. And then we kind of put it down because it wasn't having the impact we wanted it to have. And so we just prayed over it. But unfortunately, in 2019, God decided he wanted to give me a front row seat to my own funeral. Yeah. My brother-in-law, Stephen, died at the age of 38 in front of my niece and nephew, who were both high school students. Yeah. My nephew was a freshman and my niece was a senior in high school. Yeah. And they both watched their dad stand up and drop dead that day. Stephen was on 3 different types of blood pressure medicine, and he was only 38 years old. And he had a daughter off in college. And so we need our fathers, right? Yeah. And so it just made me mad. And so I was responsible for taking Stephen's black suit to the funeral home, and that's kind of where the name Black Heart Association comes from. Not just for Black people, but for the fact that nobody should have to wear a black suit to a funeral for something that can be prevented. Yeah.
So this became a real motivation for you, and take me through some of the amazing things you're doing, because you're doing a lot of free screening. You have your bus, CARDI V, I think it is, and tell me some of the things that you're doing there.
Man, CARDI V, she is a worldwide figure. She's real known, but CARDI V goes out into the community every single weekend from February to November, and we screen all over Dallas. That's where CARDI V is based, and she has a sister in Houston. We hadn't decided what to name her, but we also do national screenings. So we screened a bunch of people, and we've educated, but most importantly, we save lives, and that's the impact that we're having.
Yeah. And have you got any sort of figures on the sort of number of people you screened and the I don't know if you can't say life-saving, but the number of people you're impacting with this?
Oh, God. We're close to about 20,000 people in screenings, in education, and lives touched. We have seen just in the Dallas area, 34% of cardiovascular disease in our community deaths go down, both Tarrant and Dallas County, and that's because we're helping in this space. Yeah. And so we're very excited to see more lives change, more people going to the doctor, more people insured, and that's what the bus does. It gives point of care right then and there.
Yeah, so lives are being saved in effect. So do you have any particular favorite stories of
Yes, I got so many stories. Oh, God. From my favorite is the 14-year-old that got on the bus at a small church event, and his mom made him get screened. You know, he wasn't going to do it on his own. His mom made him get screened, and he had his lipoprotein A number our LP little a number was elevated. But it was on the lower end, but it was still high. And so she took him to the cardiovascular doctor, and he ended up having to have open heart. His grandmother came back and told us how thankful she was that we were able to alert. So it's stories like that, or the husband that gets on the bus and he's down 10 pounds next time he sees us, and his daughter has joined him, and now his wife. That's impact. That's the change we want to see. Those are the lives we're trying to touch. So we're anywhere from the corner store to the boardroom.
And so you talk about change and advocacy as well. So if I had to say, okay, Tara, You're in charge of the healthcare system in the US. Big thing to do. Tell me one or two things you'd say, I want to change that right now, first day one.
Oh my. I think healthcare should be free. I don't think anyone anywhere should not be out, go without care if needed. I would also look at access a little bit different. I think care should be door to door. So going back to our old ways, back when the doctor was in the neighborhood, in the house, the doctor's house looked like a house, it was very comforting, inviting. And so I think for us, it's always door-to-door access. And it's so much bigger than healthcare, because when I think of healthcare, I think of food, I think of employment, I think of, all of these things that make us happy and whole, and we need them. And so I think of healing houses. That's what I think of.
Healing houses, that's great. And so your story is one I've heard a lot of women with heart conditions who've been misdiagnosed, or they had a misdiagnosis, not getting the treatment they deserve. Why do you think that's happening, and what should and could be done to put it right?
We have this thing in Black Heart called Care No Cap, and basically caring for somebody holistically. I think what's happening is, for whatever reason, women continue to not be heard. Our symptoms aren't taken serious. I had a doctor tell me that me showing up to the hospital, only 20% of women actually show up with signs and symptoms of a heart attack. So the 80% that don't, oh my God, what's happening? That's scary to me. So I think we're not being heard. We're not being involved, included still. Whether that's in clinical research, whether that's in change in the healthcare system, listening to us across the board, whether it's policy, we're not being heard, and we know what we need. We know we're different. So treat us as such. We're special.
And you also use words that people are getting this misdiagnosis and not getting the treatment, and you've almost used the phrase.
Let me say it. Don't you say it?
Yeah.
Let me say it. Yeah. So when someone is misdiagnosed or sent home, like I was at any of those points, at that time, women were dying every 36 seconds from a heart attack. So had I went home and died, I considered that murder. Yeah. So when there's I get misdiagnosis, but people coming back. And coming back, that means something is going on. And we know our bodies, especially as women, we know our bodies very well. And so for you to send me home time after time, that's murder. Yeah. Because you could have stopped, I'll get a second opinion or a third one if you're not sure. So there are things that can be done to stop sending women home so frequently after we're coming in and seeking help. I know murder sounds like a very harsh word, but when somebody families needs them home, when child expects their mother to walk through that door, then we can say, okay, maybe it's not such a harsh word, but we kind of smooth it over with all the other terms.
So if you're a doctor, sometimes you don't know everything. You could be tired. There's all sorts of things. So what's the difference between a doctor not being perfect and then moving over to what you might call murder? What is to that line where it's neglect instead of...
For instance, the first doctor was like, you're too thin, you're too young. Okay, that's indoctrination. You're a Black doctor, you're young, you're doing what you hear. So we need to first change that system, how our doctors are being educated, because we know bias and racism is kind of laced in that as well. Then you get to another doctor, and she's a white female cardiovascular doctor, and she's telling you that if this is elevated, then you something's going on with your heart, but still saying, I'm sending you home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those are two different cases. One is a little biased. This one over here, I don't know what it is, but it's not sounding good. Yeah. So you send me home. If I wouldn't have begged, what could have happened? Yeah.
So serious things to consider there. Now, we're doing this podcast in association with the Global Heart Hub. One of the themes is Unite for Action for Women's Cardiovascular Health. How important, as an affiliate of the Global Hub, as a women patient, as a Black woman, how important is the association with the Global Heart Hub?
Oh, it's important. I look forward tomorrow to hearing what other people are dealing with across the globe. We learn from one from another. We learn from each other. So it's important that we come together and see what's working and what's not. and how can we do things better? So I look forward to hearing about menopause tomorrow, because that's a whole deal when it comes to women. And so, you know, just excited to hear what's happening across the globe and what's working and what's not working, and how we can come together and work to save lives.
And you're CEO of Black Heart Association. Your deputy CEO is Fredrick, your husband. How important has he been to you? Maybe what we'll do is while we do, Fredrick, would you like to come in at this point?
Okay.
So sort of time for you to tell me how important Fredrick's been for you through this process.
Ooh, wow. Fredrick holds it down. He is our chief operating officer, and he's also my balance, because I want to go save the world. And so he has to say, babe, pace yourself. And so for him, he takes all my crazy ideas and try to make my dreams come true within Black Heart, but he also makes sure I'm healthy and taking care of myself too in the process. So I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this old guy. So thank you, babe.
Going back to 2014, April, that must have been pretty traumatic for you. What were you seeing the wife you love going through this? What was that like for you? What's your memory of that time?
Well, first of all, I felt like it was very selfish for her to do all this around my birthday, pulling all the attention away from me. But you know, no, it was very, it was all new. It was all out of the blue, and it was very scary, to say the least. For this to continue to happen, and doctors not to really, you know, understand what was going on and kind of be dismissive about the whole thing. So they didn't really create a sense of urgency, which in our minds doesn't create a sense of urgency as well. So thinking back on it, that lack of urgency could have taken us a different way.
Because they didn't feel it was urgent, you felt, well, it must be okay.
Correct. Going back to work, you know. Had they said, hey, we didn't find anything, but here are some possible things that could have happened. And, you know, it just would have made us look at it a little bit different instead of going back to business as usual. At any point, we could have had a different situation.
Yeah, because these were 3 heart attacks. And on April the 12th, Tara was in the room being treated. You were elsewhere in the hospital. When did you first find out that she died, and what were you told and what were you thinking at that time?
Well, it all happened really, really fast. It seems like one second they were announcing she was having a massive heart attack, the next second she was gone. So there was not a lot of processing time in that. So at that point, you know, by then my mother-in-law was there, so I was with family, and we were just kind of, you know, waiting in limbo to see what was going on. But we all are a family of believers, so we trusted that God was going to do what God does. The doctor came out and confirmed that, and I think that's when having a conversation with the doctor is really when everything started to hit home. When he said God had her in the palm of his hands, because I lost her for a minute. And it's funny, this is how I know she's special, because he was referring to the artery that he was trying to place this in, and he said usually there's a smooth curve, but hers does a hard U-turn. So he couldn't get the stent in. He said I had to put my equipment down and step away and pray. So it was at that point I said, okay, God, we knew you were in the room, and we knew that this was going to work in your favor. So everything was hitting hard, but when he spoke those words, there was a calmness, like, okay. He even acknowledged, because a lot of times science and spiritual beliefs kind of bump heads. So to have a doctor in the room, you know, say that he stepped away and prayed, made everything just what it needed to be.
And then there's the long road afterwards that Tara's spoken about. What were you trying to do in that period when Tara was trying to recover? Mentally, it was difficult for her. What could you do, and what did you do for her?
I knew it would be difficult. You know, just understanding the psychology of women, the emotional strength that women have, that being vulnerable would be tough. So I just constantly had to remind myself to support her in whatever way I could, moment to moment. You know, thank God I had some background in fitness and health, and I felt like God placed me there for a reason because of that, because she was horrible. Just having the knowledge from the educational standpoint, the experience with individuals who are deconditioned and they're building themselves back up, nutritional experience and all those things. So I think God knew what he was doing a long time before we knew what was going to happen. And he knew, you know, the relationship that we needed to have, because I truly believe that ultimately Black Heart is what he wanted to get out of this. But we had to walk this road to get there, and he had to put the pieces together. So I was just trying to be her support, you know, her cheerleader, her encourager, hug her when she was down, you know, the good days where she felt good. Okay, let's get after it. Okay, you don't want to go to cardiac rehab, that's not an option, let's go. You know, and being able to have conversations with her around what was happening from a physical and an emotional standpoint when it comes to being torn down and having to build your body back up. So we were both blessed. She say I saved her life, but she saved mine as well.
So tell me, in Black Heart Association, Tara's CEO, your COO, so in effect she's your boss.
Yeah,
I won't say she's boss at home. That's a different thing. So tell me, what's it like working with her? Give me a tribute to what amazing things she's achieved over these last 12 years.
To be honest, prior to us working together, if someone would have said, "Hey, do you want to work with your wife every day?" I probably would have said no. But I honestly, from the bottom of my heart, am having the time of my life, and my only gripe about the whole thing is that it didn't happen sooner, that we didn't have the opportunity to work together a long time ago, because it has taught both of us so much about each other. So the things that we felt like were big rocks, you know, before all of this are so small, so minuscule, and it gives us kind of a peek into how we both think. So I know my wife is a visionary. You know, before Black Heart, I just felt like she was scatterbrained. And because I'm so methodical in 1-2 step, we always, you know, kind of butted heads. So now we have the opportunity to kind of understand how each other thinks, and we supplement that, we complement that. So she sees the big picture. I'm a process guy, so she tells me what she sees, and I figure out how to put the pieces in place to make that happen. So it's a match made in heaven, no pun intended.
Yeah. So scatterbrain is actually visionary, which is nice to hear, because I think I'm like that too. Yeah. So Tara, coming back to you, how is your health now, 12 years on from dying?
Ooh, it was good until menopause came into the picture, and so now I'm relearning my body all over again. But I think it's still good. We still make a conscious effort we're gonna always eat right. We're gonna always exercise, and keep my stress here. That's what I'm doing. So it's still working.
And for both of you, what's next for the Black Heart Association?
Buses everywhere. Yeah, buses everywhere. More lives being saved.
Yeah. So, Tara, Fredrick, thank you very much for your time. More lives being saved. That sounds fantastic. Thank you. So thank you for joining it. Thank you to Global Heart Hub, the International Association for those living with and affected by a cardiovascular disease. Thank you for watching. Please do subscribe if you can. You just need to hit the button now. And otherwise, please remember to take good care of your health.